as the law school that I would attend because I really took seriously the need to follow in the footsteps of Justice Thurgood Marshall. And I thought that if he was trained at Howard, then Howard would have to train me. And so I set out on this path to become an attorney. I didn't quite know what kind of attorney I wanted to be. There are so many areas of the law that you can go into, but what I knew was that I wanted to change the world through law. And that is the last of my life goals, which is to use the law as a tool for our most vulnerable groups and to advance society as a whole. Now, I told you that I was the first person in my family to go to college. Well, I didn't tell you that, but I told you that no one had gone to college before me. So I didn't have anyone who had blazed that trail. And here I was saying, I'm going to go to law school. My mother nourished every part of that and cultivated every part of that dream for me. And so I give her honor every time that I can, because without my mother, I would not be here, not just because she birthed me into this world, but because she nourished and fed my dreams. And so I love to tell the story about how my mother would buy me suits. She would buy me these lawyer suits. And I probably was the only kid that had a closet full of skirts and blazers at such a young age. But the only lawyer that I knew, and we can put "new" in quotation marks, was Claire Huxtable. Coming up in my neighborhood, I didn't have lawyers. We didn't know lawyers. And watching the Cosby Show with my family, I was introduced to a Black woman attorney, and I was able to see myself through Claire Huxtable being an attorney. And my mother would take me to the swap meet. My mother loved going to the swap meet on Saturday mornings, and I loved to go with her. And we would just buy these suits, and we would call them the Claire Huxtable suits. And so that was the start of me beginning to really imagine myself as an attorney and seeing myself dress as an attorney and carry myself as an attorney. And of course, church played a very big role in that as well, because church, which for a lot of Black people enables us to exercise leadership skills and hone in speaking skills. You would get up there and at the age of 8, read the announcements to our entire church congregation. And I was teaching Sunday school at a very young age. It was my uncle's church. We were a very small church. And so they put you to work. And so I would say that church has also been a very big part of helping me become the person that I am, church and my faith, of course. So let me tell you that I love this group because you recognize that the strongest weapon available to us to achieve equality is the law. So I loved reading that. And as I said, I learned that very early on in life that the law is a very powerful tool. And so my pursuit of true justice comes from my calling to be a social engineer. And that is something that is instilled in every single Howard trained attorney. We live in a society where we are told to not speak too loudly, especially if you're a woman, and especially if you are a Black woman, and especially if you are trying to dismantle oppressive systems. And that is my role. So I founded a professional motivational speaking firm that aims to empower people to write their own life story, to never relinquish their pens, to embrace every single part of their stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, the triumphs, the failures, because that makes you who you are. And you can always get back up, learn from those mistakes, and write another page in your book and write a new chapter. And because of my faith, I know that every single day is a new opportunity to do things better, that we wake up with new opportunities and brand new mercies. And so this is what I teach people, but especially young people and women, through my professional motivational speaking firm, MIA or MIA, which is motivation in action. And so my spiritual gifts are giving and encouraging. And so that's where that piece comes from. And so that's a very big part of the things that I do. But those are the things that aren't necessarily amplified. A lot of my work as an activist, or a lot of my work as the executive director of an impact litigation, rightfully so, are highlighted. But I love to give this bit of who I am to folks like you, because I think it is also important that we empower each other to really tell our stories and to embrace our stories. And what I tell young people all the time is that there are going to be people who tell you what you can and can't do, just like they told me, based on your eye color, based on your weight, based on your height, based on your zip code. And you can't ever let someone else write your story. So you can never relinquish your pen. Write your story and keep that pen in your hand. Never give anyone control over that. So that's motivation in action. In my bio, it referenced me being a volunteer attorney with the California Innocence Project. And this is important work for me, because as we think about how we can achieve a more just criminal legal system, we have to recognize that it has been unjust to so many people, including those who are still serving time for crimes that they did not commit, and people that we are working to free. And that there are people who have come home after being exonerated and who have served time for crimes that they did not commit and were just sent home without a penny to help them rebuild their lives. And so the work that I do at the California Innocence Project is very much a part of this work to help us change the criminal legal system to make it more just by bringing the stories of these folks to the forefront and saying that we've got to change the system to where it's not about statistics or conviction rates, but it is about making sure that we're doing the right things and actually protecting people who are victims of crimes. And that means seeking out the real perpetrators of crime. So I will open with this after that part, a little bit about my life story. Martin Luther King cautioned us that true peace is not merely the absence of tension, but he opined that it is the presence of justice. And so I pursue justice in all that I do. And this is why I push our entire region and everyone that I come in contact with to reimagine our world, how we perceive other people, reimagine how our government operates, and to really rethink all of our systems. The work of achieving racial and social justice is the work of building a more inclusive, equitable, and just society, a more humane society. And so when I think about justice, I think about a just society. And I always ask, how do we get impacted people at the decision-making table? And how can we achieve transformative justice? So another reason why I love this group is because you know that although law is a wonderful tool to achieve racial and social justice and equity under the law, that we know that legislation is not enough because it has to be enforced. And this is why I co-founded Community Advocates for Just and Moral Governance, or MOGO. And we are an impact litigation organization with a very simple mission. We promote good governance. We hold government at all levels accountable to all people, especially those who are marginalized or who have been disenfranchised. Now, MOGO is the only impact litigation organization in our region that is Black-led, founded by 2 Black women lawyers, myself and another attorney. We are only one of 2 impact litigation organizations in the entire region, and the other is the ACLU. And if you don't know what impact litigation is, it is when you initiate lawsuits in order to change laws or policies to affect societal change. So all of the litigation that we engage in has an eye towards changing society for the better. Right now, we have 6 active lawsuits, some against the city of San Diego and the San Diego Police Department, and some against San Diego County, which involves our San Diego sheriff. And I don't know if you all are aware, but our county jails have the highest jail mortality rate of the largest 6 counties in California. And so one of our lawsuits, which the San Diego Union Tribune just published an article about, is about us seeking class action so that whatever benefits we get from this litigation, where we allege that the sheriff has mishandled COVID-19 in our jails, they will extend past our clients to every single incarcerated person in our jails. Because we know that, especially during a pandemic like this one, if you are in jail, you don't have the capacity to do anything about social distancing on your own. You do not have safety precautions on your own. You are under the care, the custody, and the control of the sheriff. And so we initiate litigation like that one to hold our government accountable, but to also make our society better. And so I would love to come back and tell you how that case resolves, but it is looking very good for our clients and for the class that we are seeking to have certified. So the topic at hand today is how to achieve a more just and equitable criminal legal system. Well, first, in order to do that, we must recognize that all of our systems, from healthcare to foster care to education to our political systems, they're all rooted in white supremacy. And so this necessarily includes our criminal legal system. And the work that we do at MOGO is decidedly centered on achieving racial and social justice, which means bringing equity to all of these systems. So in my strong opinion, criminal justice reform, which includes police reform, is the new civil rights movement. When I look at where we are today, where I look at the landscape, I say, same officers, same dogs, same tactics. So criminal justice reform for me is the civil rights movement of a new generation. And what I know to be true in my experience of being a criminal defense attorney and a civil rights attorney is that what we see play out in our courtrooms is directly related to what plays out in our neighborhoods and on our streets. So in order to achieve a more just and equitable criminal legal system, we must first have real police reform. And that means that our primary focus has to be redirected from individual members of law enforcement agencies, the so-called bad apples, to policing systems as a whole, wherein we change the culture, norms, philosophies, practices, and policies of our law enforcement agencies. And we need real oversight for real accountability and real transparency. So I know that you all are all astute here in this group, and you know that Measure B passed with over 75% of the vote in the city of San Diego way back in 2020. Well, we're still fighting to get the Commission on Police Practices up and running that will provide accountability and transparency to the people. And we're working to implement this commission in a way that adheres to the vision and the purpose behind its establishment. And even when this happens, even when we get our Commission on Police Practices, we have to continue the work to get ordinances just like Measure B in cities throughout San Diego County. For me, it doesn't just end in San Diego. It has to be done in La Mesa. It has to be done in National City. It has to be done in Escondido. It has to be done in Encinitas. It has to be done all over the county. So that is a challenge for all of us, that we continue to work so that it's not just San Diego. Because does it make sense that things have changed in one part of the county and not in others, and people are not protected in the same way across our county? It doesn't. So we want to make sure that we are staying vigilant and that we get the victory here, but we get the victory all around the county. And so that's also something that I'm committed to. What I think our biggest fight is the PROTECT ordinance. PROTECT is a law that we hope to get on the books in the city of San Diego. PROTECT is an acronym. PROTECT stands for Preventing Over-Policing Through Equitable Community Treatment. I can tell you that after 4 formal studies, 3 of which were initiated by government agencies, including the San Diego Sheriff's, San Diego Police Department, and San Diego City Council. 3 of the 4 were commissioned by these entities. And after having 4 formal studies now show us that we have racial disparities in policing, our elected officials have done nothing to provide or put forward a meaningful solution that seeks to address these racial disparities in policing. Our elected officials have done nothing to address over-policing that happens in some communities. So the PROTECT ordinance is the people's solution. It has the goal of curbing racial profiling and reducing racial disparities in policing. I can tell you that the challenges that we face as Black people in obtaining justice before the law are the same issues that impact other communities, whether they're communities of color or they are communities where folks have disabilities. We're seeing that we have disparities in policing through studies like the Campaign Zero report that shows that people with perceived disabilities are treated differently, that people who are perceived to be from the LGBTQIA community are also policed differently. And we really have to get a handle on these things. As of late, I've seen our police chief, the chief of the San Diego Police Department, come out and say, and I quote, "I am vehemently against PROTECT." And I'm thinking, why would you be against something that seeks to curb racial profiling, reduce racial disparities in policing, and actually treat people equally under the law? From some of the reports that we now have in our arsenal, we know that San Diego Police Department stopped Black people at 219% higher rate than white people. And once stopped, Black people were more likely to be searched and arrested and to have force used against them than white people. But get this, even with the higher searching of Black people and Latinos, Black people and Latinos were less likely to be found after the search with any contraband or illegal items. So let's just think about that. And there's also something else that I want to say. I have been thinking about how we word things and how we talk about things. And this idea that we have to compare groups to white people, make white people the standard and the default. Now, follow me. If we are all created equal, and if we are all guaranteed equal justice under the law, there shouldn't be one group that is the standard for how someone should be treated. And so when I think about this, and I'm still thinking about this and trying to figure out, what the language is, I think I'm getting close. But I think that we really have to think about this in a way that is very comprehensive and gets to those basics, right? These precepts that we are supposed to have equal justice under the law, so no one should be treated differently. No one should be over-policed. Other groups shouldn't be treated with more bias by our police departments. Everyone should be treated the same, whether you're in La Jolla or whether you are on Market Street in District 4 of the city of San Diego. So if I wasn't clear, please, question and answer period, say, what did you mean? And, because I'm always still just thinking about these things. And I think about how there's a lot of juvenile injustice and we have a fight for our children. And we know that Black children and Latinx children were prosecuted as adults more so than their white counterparts who were similarly situated by the district attorney's office here in San Diego County before through a proposition, we took the ability for the prosecutors to make that call on their own and gave it back to judges. We know that there are disparities in sentences between children of color and their white counterparts in our courts. We know that Black youth are adultified. We know that the death penalty is very arbitrary. It's very discriminatory. We know all the stories about racial profiling and other unfair police practices. And these are things that we have to get a handle on. But here's what we can do. And this is, I want to challenge this group because, Charlotte said, look, we're white women. we come from the middle class and we live in certain neighborhoods. And, I really just wanted to make sure that I could cater this talk to you all because we need everyone, right? All of our destinies are inextricably linked. All of our destinies are tied up together, right? This is something that Dr. King talks about. And so in a world where we talk about allies and elevating allyship, I'm thinking, I think I want to do away with that as well. I'm always thinking about how we need to rethink even the language we've been handed down. So I don't know if it's necessarily that we need to talk about being allies as so much about just recognizing the humanity in other people. So there I go. I'm gonna get off that soapbox. But here's the first thing that I'll challenge this group to do. When you see propaganda, question it. And I say propaganda on purpose. And I know that this may be a very big challenge for a lot of people in this room because of how you were brought up or raised or your experiences. I know that we have at least two different Americas, right? There's the reality of two different Americas, and the George Floyd situation really, really showed that reality. And people say, I also believe that there are two justice systems. And I'm still thinking about whether I want to adopt that language or to continue to adopt the language of two justice systems. And the reason why I say this is because I used to say that the system was broken until I realized that the system is actually operating the way that it was intended. If we look at the origin of policing and how our first formal and informal police patrols were slave patrols, and their very duties were capturing people who ran away and try to free themselves from their enslaved conditions, and you bring them back to their quote unquote owners. And this is the origin of policing. And so I've done away with the language of a broken system. But do I believe that there are two justice systems, or do I believe that we have a justice system that is working the way that it has been intended to work? So much to the point that I don't call it a justice system. I don't call it a criminal justice system. I call it a criminal legal system because we don't have justice there yet, largely in part due to a lot of the things that I referenced just a bit earlier. But going back to this reality of two Americas, the George Floyd situation showed us that there is a part of America that grew up and believes that law enforcement is to be trusted. And there are certain segments in that particular America that also understands that they can weaponize law enforcement against other people, namely poor people, Black people. Then there's the other America where their interactions with law enforcement hasn't been so pleasant. And they recognize that law enforcement can be weaponized against them, that 911 can be weaponized against them, and that even if they call 911, they may be on the receiving end of physical violence. They may be arrested because they look like the suspect, and they may be in harm's way. And so they would rather not call the police. When I ask you all to question propaganda when you see it, it may be counter to what you know. You may have been raised with officer friendly. And I'm a person whose pastor was a detective in San Diego Police Department for many, many years until his retirement. I am not anti-law enforcement, but I also recognize that I have experiences that lead me to question whether or not I can be safe with law enforcement and whether I can trust the narrative. When I think about the narrative right now around the Protect ordinance, hasn't even made it to city council. The words that I hear the police chief say, there was a montage that was put together by the Police Officers Association. And it's a montage of news reporters saying that violent crime is on the rise in San Diego. And this led to their conclusion that the Protect ordinance is bad, and who are we seeking to protect through this particular ordinance? A lot of times we are faced with a narrative from power holders and people who want to maintain their power. They just want to keep the system in place that works for them. And we have to question whether the narrative that they're giving us is even true. I'm thinking about the San Diego Sheriff's coverage regarding the fentanyl incident, where they actually alleged that a sheriff deputy, by just simply coming in contact, never touching the fentanyl, passed out. It's been refuted, not just by science and studies, but the sheriffs never had anything to support it. They've never gone back and taken down those videos. They've never gone back and said, we were mistaken, we jumped the gun. They've never had to do that. And so I want us to question even the language that we have been given and that we adopt. Language like public safety. I really believe we have to reimagine what public safety means. Because for me, public safety has to mean the public and community members being safe, even from rogue police officers that commit brutal acts, that kill people without any reason under the law. We have to question things that we've been handed, and that even means the language that we use. I also want to say that right now we are in a moment, and we have to view it as a moment because we're not quite there at a movement yet. It's up to us to make it a movement. But we've seen the cries for justice with George Floyd. And I'll tell you, that's one incident. One officer gets convicted, but that's not systemic. We demand justice for Breonna Taylor. That didn't work out too well. But every day there's going to be a new story for us to look to and demand justice. And we have to commit to taking these moments, the moment that we're in now, and making it, transforming it into an actual movement where we change, where we make real change that's necessary. And that means that we have to have these hard conversations. And I'll tell you, America is very fickle. One day this is the hot story, the next day it's not. But we have to be resolute in our commitment to actually striving to make a more just and fair and equitable criminal legal system, the way that we can do individually. I'm not telling anyone to undertake some big project, but whatever you can do, just commit to doing your part, because we've got to change it. And I hate the fact that we have two Americas. I really want us to be one unified America and have the policing systems as they should be. And I think that we can do that. So next thing, I would say support organizations that are committed to achieving social and racial justice and making equal justice under the law a reality. Organizations like mine, if I could do a plug. And I always say, in a very real sense, Black people in organizations like Mogul are really doing the work to make America live up to her promises. In Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, he said some very powerful words that most people either forget or never knew that he said in the speech, because we tend to focus on the I have a dream part of the speech. But I want to leave you all with some of the words that he spoke in that speech that are just as true today as they were back then, and that are just as powerful. King said, in a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. No, we are not living under de jure segregation, but we are still living with the vestiges of slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow because we never fully eradicated the root of those systems. And one only has to look at the state of our criminal legal system. As King reminded us, it would be fatal for our nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. And so here's my last challenge. It is the need for us all to be explicit about the need to fight against and to combat anti-Blackness. Despite reforms that we've seen in recent years, we've seen the number of police killings remain consistent. The number of police killings every year since 2013 total about 1,000. And what is more is that 99% of the killings result in officers not being charged. We are in a time where even protesting police brutality is met with even more police brutality, and the activities that Black people can engage in or not engage in, actually is a better statement, is getting longer and longer. And we have lots of examples of that. So I turn to King and I say these words. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. So I ask you all to not be satisfied until, as King says, justice rolls down like the waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. And we can't be satisfied until Black people are no longer victims of racial profiling, being searched and stopped more than their white counterparts. And I want to thank you for having this conversation, for allowing me to be here. Prayerfully, I will be back with you all. We will be standing at the finish line with the things that we hope to get over the line, like the Protect Ordinance and a meaningful commission on police practices and the other work that needs to be done. But until then, I say, let's continue to love each other, work together, and having these conversations. So with that, I'll open it up for questions and answers.
Am I on?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. I want to meet your mother. What a wonderful person. Now, I have some questions, and we were going to use chat, but does anybody want to speak up and have a question? Do I have
I was taking notes, Genevieve, and I was writing down the acronym for PROTECT, and I didn't get it all down. So would you tell us again what it is?
Yes, it is preventing over policing through equitable community treatment.
Thank you.
Very good.
And I should put in the chat a link so that if you all want to read more about it and how you can send emails to your representative on city council, you can do that, urging them to pass, protect, and also sign a petition. So I will also put that in the chat.
All right, I see Donna Lily. Donna Lily, do you want to ask your question or shall I read it?
I'll ask her a question.
There you go.
You, Genevieve, you are a wonderful speaker. Just who influenced you along the way to give your rationale and then your answer and then a summary? You're wonderful. Who influenced you along the way?
Oh man, you know, thinking back, I did the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech in elementary school every year. And I remember being a little girl. My mom put me in this beautiful emerald green and black dress. And back then we used to have a show called Sun Up San Diego, I believe it was. And I recently wrote to them and well, not them because they're defunct, but the station that it was on. And I said, hey, I was a little girl and I was there. I want the footage. And they're like, we don't have any of those files. And I know that my mom had it on VHS, but I was there because I won the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech. And I would do this speech every year. And that was something that we did at Knox Elementary. And I have really been thinking about it. I'm just going to do it this year about my motivational speaking firm, bringing that back to our elementary schools and having children learn the I Have a Dream speech and having them compete. And I think it would just be wonderful. And back then we would actually perform. If you were the winner of the speech competition, you would perform it at the Martin Luther King parade. And so I want to do that again for our kids. So King has always just been a tremendous orator. And then when I was in high school at Patrick Henry, I became captain of my speech and debate team. And so I would compete there. And so I've always just had this love for speeches. And the very first competition that I did in high school was one of Frederick Douglass's most popular speeches, now I can't even remember. What to the slave is the 4th of July. And a very, very powerful speech. And so, yeah, I would say that helped me along the way for sure. Thank you. No one has ever asked me that before.
Oh, I don't care if you're on Zoom or you're in person, eyeball to eyeball. You have a great way, your presentation, your personal speech, and the words you use are phenomenal. Young people need you. They need you.
I appreciate that.
Those are those young people, the ones who are going to vote for pieces of legislation and influence changes. You are a part of it. But you can be a greater part. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vicki, you have some questions.
Yes, you mentioned that our local San Diego Police Department really hasn't done anything. And I wondered if you could tell us about other communities that maybe have moved forward and have actually enacted some reforms. I know several have done away with the restraint, the keratoid restraint. Can you give us any more information about positive things that are happening?
Yes. So one of the things that the PROTECT Act will do is it will limit low-level offense contacts. So we know from studies that Black drivers and Latino drivers are pulled over overwhelmingly for equipment violations. And this is what gives rise to the subsequent searches that are really unreasonable under the circumstances, and that lead to these other things that we're finding result in biased police practices. So what Protect will do is it would actually take off some of those low-level offenses so that folks would never have to engage with a police officer if their registration is expired, for example. Other communities like Berkeley, and there's another jurisdiction, what they've done is they have created either a citizens group that will enforce those types of low-level offenses, or they have unarmed officers that would then contact these drivers. There's a way to do this where we don't need contact at all. There could be, whether it is police officers or not, but they could easily note the license plate number, send the information to the DMV, and then the DMV sends someone a notice that says, hey, your tags are expired. But we know that when we cut down on low-level offenses, that we reduce the contacts, and then we reduce some of the killings that we've been seeing, not just in San Diego, but also all across the state and the nation. And we also reduce traumas. I'm thinking about the young man who was in a car with his, I think, 9-year-old son at the time. And they said that the father was speeding, and this is in the zoo area on Park Boulevard. And they trained a gun not just on him, but also on his adolescent son. And this is because of an allegation of speeding. And so if we can cut down on armed officers dealing with these type of low-level offenses, which is what the Protect ordinance would do, we will definitely see a change. And so we have seen other jurisdictions thinking along those same lines. I know that Los Angeles is thinking about some of these things as well. And I really just want San Diego to get on track. The other thing is that the Protect ordinance is really pioneering language. And that has been something that has been cited by our city attorney as a drawback, if you will. Whereas I see it as an opportunity for San Diego to actually do something meaningful and powerful and model for other jurisdictions. And so we would be leading the fight there if we did get Protect on the books, and other people would be looking to us and saying, that's great, why haven't we done this? So, you know, people are thinking about doing things differently. They're doing it differently in a number of ways, but as to traffic, those are some of the ways that I'm thinking about.
Lillian Payne, you have a good point. Speak up. What's your question? Where's Lillian? Well, then I'll
You're
read.
muted, Lily, you're muted.
Oh, good for you,
I
Jay.
don't want to cough and you hear me cough, so I always mute myself.
There you are.
Yeah, I'm Lillian Payne, and I'm a professor at Palomar College. I teach a couple of diversity courses there too. Very committed to diversity. My own family is bilingual, bicultural, biethnic. You know, so I'm on the same page. I hope you're all on the same page. But I teach. I start out with the concept of race. Students really muddle through that concept, period, and it's really quite complex. But after I let them explore, because they need to build their own knowledge, really, don't they? I do close the conversation then with Maya Angelou's perspective that we're really all the human race.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Absolutely. No, you know, it really is something. And I talk about a common recognition of our humanity. And that really is what it's all about. I mean, we can read all of these books and come to the understanding that race is a social construct. It's really not real, but we've made it real. And so I even struggle with that as I'm talking, because we do the Black people, white people, Latinx people, and it's just like, oh man, we've made this thing so real. And we've made it real through how we interact with each other. So I know that we can also make it unreal by interactions and by changing hearts and minds. And so it is a struggle. I completely get it, because I recognize it is such a construct that we've made real, though. I mean, it's just like currency. We've made that, it's a construct, but we've made it real. And I really do want to get us back to seeing each other as just humans, worthy of life, dignity, shelter, so.
Genevieve, I don't know if you've met Tristan Higgins. She has a company called Made Inclusive, which works with I won't get all the letters, Tristan, LGBTQA, I think. So Tristan, you had a comment?
Not really. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Genevieve's, and we've worked together before. So
have you?
when I saw you were speaking, I had to join, and I apologize for being so distracted today, but I have carpet cleaners here because my wife is coming home tomorrow. And so it's just like a nightmare here, but I mean, a lucky nightmare, I suppose, but I just, every time I get to hear you speak, Genevieve, I'm always happy to do so. So, yeah.
Well, anytime I get to see your face, I am happy. So I'm glad that you came on camera, especially with that green wall in the background. You are inspiring me. I'm going to have to get me a nice green wall. I have a yellow wall in one of my rooms, but green is my favorite color. And I'm thinking I could do it.
Yeah, so. I realized I had the wrong shirt on to be sitting in front of that wall. No, there's not a single white wall in this house. We have gray, we have purple, red, raspberry, orange, yellow, anyway. Yeah, no, I was really happy to hear all of the different things that you're doing. I hadn't been keeping up after, with Mogo and stuff, but it's so cool. I wonder, I guess maybe this is kind of a softball question, but I wonder how many people really know why those traffic stops are so problematic, right? That, because I think the concept of a pretext stop is probably fairly esoteric. Oh, maybe not. I see a lot of people shaking their heads, but I don't know. Did you want to talk about that at all, or?
Yeah, I actually teach at Point Loma Nazarene as an adjunct professor. And the reason why I love to teach at Point Loma is because they have a program that draws a lot of folks that want to be in law enforcement. So I get to teach future law enforcement agents from my perspective. And one thing that I talk about, Tristan, is this concept of pretextual stops and how they're not illegal. You can do a pretextual stop, but they're completely problematic, because if we think about what officers base pretextual stops on, it is most likely the discriminatory practice of race. So I am going to say that I'm stopping you because you have a broken taillight, but it's really because I want to look into other possible criminal activity, even though I have no basis to believe that you've been involved in a crime, or that you will be, or that you just were. And so this concept of pretextual stops is also one that we have to talk about. And when we were writing the language of protect, we were kind of like following all of this language. And there was a lot of stuff that we said, okay, they're never going to go for that. But we wanted to really strike at the heart of the disparities and the bias in policing. And so we do talk about pretext stops, which is why with the protect ordinance, we are saying you have to have probable cause in order to do certain things, not just reasonable suspicion, not just because you want to, look into some other things after you do a pretext stop, but you have to have probable cause. And the other part of that is no more consent searches, because we know what happens on stops like the pretext stops, where you can just write a doggone ticket for that broken taillight or expired registration or give them a warning. But when an officer says, can I search you? How many people are going to feel that they can actually say no? Because most people think if I say no, then one, they're going to think I'm guilty and I'm hiding something. Two, this is just going to prolong my stop and I'm trying to just get home. So if I just say yes, then maybe I'll get home faster. But three, lots of people are not comfortable with telling no to someone in authority. And so going back to something that I did want to say, Vicki, in response to your question, is this idea, these Band-Aid solutions that San Diego continues to put up. When they knew Protect was coming and that we were asking for a ban on consent searches, the police department said very quickly, well, we've changed our policy. Now we have to advise people that they can say no and that they can withdraw their consent. That doesn't help. It doesn't help. We need a meaningful solution. We need to get to the root of the problem. And by saying you need probable cause to search, which is the constitutional standard, any doggone way, and by getting rid of these consent searches, we are getting to the root. We can just eradicate all of the unnecessary searches that are not supported by probable cause. But here we are with the Band-Aid solution so that they can say, look, we've already addressed this, but they really haven't. And so unfortunately, San Diego continues to do that. And you mentioned the karate restraint. I mean, it was years and years and years, and we kept, we were having forums and we were talking with the police department and they wouldn't do it. And we were showing them science. We had doctors come in, and it wasn't just that the karate restraint was deadly, but we were showing through science and medical studies and real life cases and people that it was even more deadly than for Black people, for Black men especially. And this is who they were using the tactic on more so than anyone else. And so it was even more deadly for them. They said, well, no, it's a tool. And we want to continue to use this tool. And it wasn't until George Floyd where they saw everything ramping up and they said, well, we got to do something. Okay, we'll get rid of the karate restraint. But it shouldn't come down to that. And I've always felt, yes, I'm glad that you finally took it off the books, but this was low-hanging fruit. This is something you should have done years ago when we were asking you to do it in the name of humanity and saving lives. And so we also have to be vigilant about that as well. I see your hand, Joni.
Yes, I wondered, last night on the news, I heard a Democrat, California Democrat, talking about the law they're trying to get passed about jaywalking, because jaywalking is so often an entryway into the legal system for minorities. And so I hope it passes, but I wanted your take on that.
Oh yeah, when we look at jaywalking enforcement, we can look at certain neighborhoods. For instance, I worked in City Heights and they would do a jaywalking sting. Why are we using our resources for this? And one of the men who actually worked at the nonprofit that I was at the time as a legal director was caught in this jaywalking sting. And this is a person who is of Middle Eastern descent, who doesn't speak English as a first language. And he was just walking with people. He followed the flow of the crowd, and then they nabbed him for jaywalking. And we see enforcements like this only in certain neighborhoods. I know that depending on who you are and walking downtown San Diego, you're not going to get stopped for jaywalking if you are wearing a business suit. Trust me, I know. But if you are not, and you are looking as if you are not a professional or what have you, then you would be cited. And this is something we knew. This is something that I knew as a public defender working in our downtown courts, that they use jaywalking to then have an encounter with people to then do other things. And so this is where they get into those fishing expeditions that are really prohibited under the Constitution, but they get away with it because they've stopped you for jaywalking. And it's not that you were in harm's way or you put other people in danger. It is simply just, you didn't make it across the light, in enough time. I've seen that happen, but they use that as a door entry for other things. So yes, jaywalking is very much a part of the bias policing, and it is definitely an enforcement that is not done consistently everywhere at balance.
I have another question. Last year, when all the social unrest was going on, our organization began reading, and Isabel Wilkerson's Cast and all the anti-racist literature, and I cannot think of the young man that wrote, begins with a K, but the whole concept of us becoming anti-racist, you can't just say I'm not a racist. we need to become anti-racist. And so we've had multiple conversations about that. But my question for you is, do you see more young African-American people becoming activists as a result of the last 2 years and all the good literature that's come out and the movement? I certainly hope so, so that you're not out there alone. Have you noticed that?
Yes, and I want to thank Tristan for putting Ibram Kendi's name in the chat. And I have seen more empowerment of young people to take to the streets, to raise their voices. I will say this, and this is on a very, very personal note. I had a love-hate relationship with the word activist, and I'll tell you why. I think that the word activism and activist gets tied to negative connotations. When we hear even some of our elected officials and our public officials talk about activists, it's like this disdain. It's as if we're anarchists, as if we're just sort of just shouting and just trying to just tear everything down. And when I was inducted into the San Diego County Women's Hall of Fame last year, I was inducted under activism. And I will tell you that I had to recenter and really think about my relationship with that word. Now, where I came out was, I am proud to have that honor, proud to wear that label. And as I said in my speech, you can't spell activist or activism without act, right? So we should be proud of the doers who are working to make our society better. But what I see happening, and especially in this conversation around police reform, criminal legal reform, criminal justice reform, is that how they undermine the work is by saying, oh, those are just those activists that are pushing protect, for example. And we need everyone like you all to say, no, it's not just the quote unquote activists, those loud mouths that they can name, right? The people who are always out there, the people who are protesters, the people who call people out. But it's all of us, that every single segment of our community is concerned about racial profiling. And it's really incumbent upon all of us to not allow it to be pinned on the activists so that they can discredit it. And the other way that they do it is that by calling people activists, they make us outsiders in a sense that it's as if we're not a part of the community. It's as if we're not here living and experiencing these things, and we've kind of just manufactured something for our own agenda. And when they say activists, it really, it burns me up, I'll be honest with you, because it also, it drives the narrative that community members don't have agency, that we don't know what is good for us. And so I wanted to just kind of share that bit with you to be transparent about even my own journey with having to come to terms with being considered an activist, right? And what that means. But I love it because it was activists like Angela Davis. It's activists like Martin Luther King. It's activists who got things done. It was the actors and the doers, the agitators. And so I am proud to say that I am seeing more young people be activated and raise their voices and do what they can to educate themselves and be super empowered to say we need change, and they work to make that change. So didn't mean to take you all the way around the mulberry bush, but wanted to kind of just give you a little bit of my history on that as well. Because nothing is a straight line, especially with me. I'm such a self-reflector. I love to sit back and question things. And I'm finding myself taking a lot of words out of my lexicon, words that I've said because my mom said it, or, you know, because I've learned it from somewhere in society. And when I say it, even if I'm talking with a group of people, you know, in my class on Tuesday night, I slipped because I had been doing so good. And I said, you all have to powwow with each other. And I said, oh my gosh, I just said powwow. And my kid said, wait, what happened? You can't say powwow? And I was like, no, it's not good. And so then I had a conversation with them, but those are the teaching moments, right? We're not going to get it right all the time. And because we're humans, we've been programmed and conditioned and we've taken on language. And so I'm just trying to be very intentional about the language that I use. But even in those moments where I fail, it's like, let me highlight that so then I can have a conversation with you. And then maybe it'll change your mind or you can think about it a little differently as well. So, okay, enough of my tangential speech.
Genevieve, so much of this is cultural. If you were a white male, I think you could say a lot of things and not be criticized for it. White women also are told to be quiet, not to be obtrusive. You shouldn't speak like that. Being a white woman, I have well understood the position in a way that African Americans are in because they must be well behaved. Behavior is very important. Do you understand what I mean? It's so cultural how you behave and what is considered correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of my favorite t-shirts is well-behaved women seldom make history. And I got that from the museum. And I love wearing that shirt because that is the truth, right? And I completely get what you're saying. And, that's why I talk about empowering women in general, because we are told, why don't you just sit there and look cute, look dainty, don't be too loud, don't put up a fuss. And I'm sorry, that's not going to happen, right? So, yes, and I get it doubly, and I even say triply. When I was in college, I used to be a poet. So I've had a few past lives, and I used to write a lot of poetry. One day, maybe I'll get back to it, but I had a poem in college where I talked about my 3 strikes. And one was because I was a woman, the other was because I was Black, and the other is because I was born poor. And, to really think about, those things. And a lot of things are cultural. Women are taught differently. Our girls are taught differently than our boys. And so one of the things that I do with Motivation in Action is I do a lot of coaching, one-on-one coaching with young girls. And we talk about things like negotiating salary and how you walk in and your worth. And these are things that women are not taught, whereas men will simply walk into a room, think that they are owed something, and by the way, have less knowledge than the women. And, but they're raised that that's perfectly okay, whereas we are educated very differently. But it is time for women to stand up. I mean, this is why we have the pay gap that we have. That's a part of it, right? I mean, obviously it's systemic and it's made that way, but we also are just taught very differently about the role of women, even in the workplace and in the things that we should ask for or demand. And so, yeah, I completely understand.
Thank you. Jerry?
I just want to say that I've been poring over, maybe I read it the 3rd time right now, Caste. And I am going to lead a book discussion or a couple of them. And this gives me an idea of how you could end it. What can we do about it? How can we do something? Because we've been programmed, as the book shows us, we don't even know why we think the way we do about caste and class and Black and white and ethnic groups. So I just want to say I really enjoyed this, and I feel like I've got a way, something I can end my discussion with. What can we do about it?
Oh man, I am such a believer in conversations. I love these types of conversations because honestly, we know that you can't legislate hearts, right? We can change laws, but we can't legislate hearts. How we change hearts and minds are through or is through us really, I'm going to say it again, seeing our common humanity. And that does start with conversations. I mean, if we think about how sitting with someone, breaking bread with people, and really kind of just getting to know them, you know, not talking about political views, but really talking about, well, how does someone grow up? You know, tell me about your mom. Tell me what your favorite outfit is. Why? You know, tell me about the last book that you read. Tell me about your TV show, to start to have these conversations. And then once you start to build these relationships and even move on to the harder conversations, or if you want to, just jump right in and start with the hard conversations. But I think that that's how we do our part, and to also challenge each other, you know, not challenge in a way that is negative, but I think that we owe it to all of us, right? We're each other's sisters and we're siblings. And to say, you know, when someone says something that maybe sounds like, you know, there's a negative spin to it, to reframe it in a positive way, present it as an opportunity, for instance, or to question, you know, well, why would you say that? Why would you use that term? Can we talk about it? And I think that we have to be comfortable with having these sorts of uncomfortable conversations. And I've been a part of a lot of them lately. I really have. And I've invited them, you know, in La Mesa, when someone had burned the bank down or tried to burn the bank down, and they were protesting over the police, and they had brought in the National Guard. Someone emailed me. I have no clue who this person is. I get these emails where these people, I don't know if they just make up email addresses, they start to just make accounts so that they can anonymously email me. But someone emailed me and said, I saw you on the news with your crocodile tears at the press conference, and it's because of you that La Mesa burned, and the reason why we had to have the National Guard. And I was like, what? And I responded back, I said, I would love to talk with you. I would love to have a conversation with you. We can do it in person. We can social distance if you're comfortable with that, or we can do it through Zoom. But I really think a conversation about why you believe that, you know, and just to hear more about your thoughts would be good for us both. And I found myself extending this invitation to a lot of people because I just got something else. Like, you know, I get hate mail and I'm like, what? I'm just trying to like spread love, I promise you. But putting myself out there and saying, hey, would you mind just sitting down with me and having a conversation? Because it's gonna do nothing for me to fire back and say, well, you know, I have these statistics and you're wrong. And, you know, that doesn't work. But if we can sit down and have conversations, we may not get up agreeing with each other, but at least we've had the conversation, we behaved, we were cordial, we saw each other's humanity. We can walk away and agree to disagree. But I think that that's also life changing. And so, you know, I would say just kind of putting ourselves out there, maybe not to these perfect strangers that find their way into our circles, you know, as a first step, but doing it within our own circles and our own friends and our own family members, and just gently pushing back or questioning something that was said or done. Because I do think that a lot of times people need to see that the people that they love see something different than they do. And then that will also help to change their mind. And also on that note, Geraldine, I have a book club. I launched a book club we started January of 2021, and we read Cast. We read, oh my gosh, we had half of the authors of the books that we read actually come into the sessions with us. So we have started back this year, but my members said they didn't want to do a book a month. We're doing it every other month. So that way we're just doing 6 books. And we actually are going to have our very first meetup February 26th. So we try to do it on the 3rd or the 4th Saturday of the month on even months at 2 p.m. from 2 to 3:30. So any of you can join us. We are actually reading Bishop Desmond Tutu's book, the one on forgiveness. Why am I not? Okay, fine, but that's it. You can read the book. I'm trying to tell you, my mind is like, I don't want to speak it into existence, but I'm like, I think I'm gonna need Prevagen in like 2 weeks. So just know that you are not the only person that walks into a room and say, why did I come in here? So yes, but we are reading Bishop Tutu's book. So you can definitely join us for that book or any of our books.
Oh, thank you.
May I ask a question, Genevieve? You say up here, sign the petition here. B-I-T, no, I'm really a beginner. How do we sign your petition?
So that is the link to our landing page for Protect. It'll take you directly to the petition, but once you get onto the page, you can navigate the entire site and learn more about what the Protect ordinance will do. There is a place for you to hit a button and just send your support of Protect to your elected official on city council. And you can also sign the petition there. So yes, that is a link that will get you to our page for that.
That's right. Thank you. We have time for one more question. Do we have another? Yeah,
Charlotte?
yes, Sue, of course.
I just wanted to say, and I hope you don't take this wrong, but while you were speaking, I went in, I already signed the petition. It takes like 2 seconds. It's a very easy thing to do. And you can leave a comment. I couldn't click on the link here, but I just Googled it and it came up. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for signing that petition. And, I just have to underscore what I said earlier, that it is so very important for community members like you all to tell your representatives that you do care about Protect and you support it, because they really want to undermine the importance of Protect by saying there's only, this few people. And as a matter of fact, someone sent a link to me last night, and the Police Officers Association actually said the people who want to defund the police are pushing Protect. And I'm like, what? And so, I don't even use those words. I talk about reallocating the funds and taking things off of the police plates because they're not trained and didn't get into that to do half of the stuff we asked them to do. But anyhow, so thank you so much, Sue, because it is so important for us to get Protect over the finish line. And a big way to do that is by showing that there is support for a wide cross-section of our community. So thank you.